Hello, welcome to another Search with Sean, and this is part of the Chat with Sean series, where you'll find obviously the playlist on this in the description, and obviously it's all on Spotify as well. So you haven't checked that out, all the videos can be found on Spotify. So search for Chat with Sean, and they'll all be there. So we'll just get into some admin stuff as usual, and then I'll introduce my great guests, which I'm really excited about. But yeah, just generally in terms of admin. So as usual, we've had some recent great chats with other industry experts. And last week we had Amanda Walls on, as you may know, director of award-winning digital marketing agency, Cedarwood Digital, and host of Manchester DM, and has spoken at all the big events like Brighton SEO. And we covered things like agency life and digital PR. They were the main topics, but we covered loads of great stuff. So you can go back and watch that, and I'll put a link somewhere. It'll pop up. And then I'm trying something new. So we do the SEO and AI news. They're usually quite lengthy episodes, go into great detail about the stories. They're fantastic. I'm trying something new in between those episodes and doing kind of quick fire news episodes. So I've done one the last few days, and I covered 17 stories around SEO and AI, digital marketing, all in 28 minutes. So if you want a real quick fire update of what's going on in the crazy world of SEO and AI and digital marketing, then that's a great one to watch. And that's about it. So I'll get cracking with the introduction, and we can get on to some really awesome topics I'm really looking forward to. So as you can probably see, my guest is Christian J. Ward. He's a leading figure in data strategy and partnerships. Christian is an executive vice president and chief data officer at Yext, which is a New York-based digital presence platform company. He's also the co-author with his brother of the Amazon #1 bestseller, Data Leverage, Unlocking the Surprising Growth Potential of Data Partnerships. And it covers how companies can unlock the full potential of their data through well-crafted partnerships, especially to harness opportunities in AI. So yeah, it's a real pleasure to have you on, Christian. I'm really looking forward to this chat. And yeah, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sean. I'm excited to have the conversation with you.
Awesome. So let's get to it. Obviously, I sent you these prior, but we'll try and get through as many as we can in this time. So if you can just tell me quickly about your current role as Chief Data Officer at Yext, and what's the main responsibilities you have, and how do they shape the company's direction? That'd be really interesting.
Sure. So my role is actually a little different than most chief data officers. So I've been a chief data officer of companies where, generally speaking, a CDO is there to identify the data assets of a company and help either monetize them or scale them or leverage them more realistically. Actually, at Yext, it's quite different. It's a lot of fun, which is I'm not so much worried about Yext assets in terms of data. I'm working with the clients and our partners in market. So literally my day is I could be talking to a global toy manufacturer that makes little bricks for an hour. The next session, I'm talking to one of the top cancer research hospital systems in America. And then after that, I'm talking to 500 small businesses through one of our partners. So the idea here is I sit with these clients and these partners and these relationships, and I analyze how they're using their data today. So we sort of break it down into what are the sort of atomic units of data that are the most important, so that we can better leverage them in terms of using the knowledge graph, using Yext tools, but also just what should their strategy be going forward, because so much is changing so fast. You just said you did 17 topics in 27 minutes of change. That's a lot. And so I fortunately get to work with all of these literally hundreds of different platforms every day.
That's great. It must be so fascinating to have those discussions. And so, yeah, so how do you describe what data is, and how do you ensure it's reliable? Obviously, yeah, I'd be really fascinated to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. So for a long time, people use this analogy like data is the new oil, and that just drives me nuts. I can't stand that. I basically would say I tended to always look at it as more like a calorie, like a caloric unit of stored energy. And the idea, generally speaking, is that when you get the right calories in the right process, you actually are running as an efficient a system as possible. And so, generally speaking, the reason why I say that is I think we're kind of living through this data gluttony phase where people are storing and using way too much data. We are obese on data, and it's not helping people make better decisions. In fact, if you think of most companies or people you work with, like think of just SEOs in general, they have like 19 tools and 1 billion data points per day. And I'm sorry, your brain, whether AI enabled or not, is not capable of actually leveraging that in a way that where you can see all the different components or the intricacies of the relationships. And so I think a better or more useful thought is, what is the leanest data, meaning what is the highest caloric value of a piece of information in terms of what energy does it release and opportunity does it release? And that could be either creatively in terms of how people use it, or it could be in its ability to then build a partnership or an asset to another party so that you can continue to build value off of it.
That's great. Have you got any examples of how that could be executed? Or
Sure. So, I mean, going back to the beginning of my career, I actually started on working on Wall Street in structured data. Is where I started my first company. I was 23 years old, and it was all designed to work with these very, I will say at the time, strange data sets, and then resell them to hedge funds. And so that's actually where some of the greatest data partnerships got started, was in financial services, which tends to be, which is, for example, like when I was first starting in the business, people know about this now, but back then it was the first time satellite imagery companies would start to sell to financial service companies the satellite imagery of every major mall in America for the day after the week of Thanksgiving and what we call Black Friday, the most important shopping day of the year. And literally by hand, they would count the number of cars in the parking lots via satellite imagery to figure out if those stores were going to have better years than the year before. So like that's one of those examples where like, really? And so I've been working in alternative data partnerships where you take something like, for example, like media coverage. A lot of people don't realize, but if you see like a CEO on a magazine cover, like in the checkout aisle, or you see like all these, if you see a CEO 3 or 4 times in one like outing, like past a bookstore on magazine covers, there's a problem, because it means that company is fundamentally resorting to PR. Something's wrong. And see, hedge funds, they figure this stuff out because they can make money on it. But it's just this idea of there are these data sets that seem unconnected, and it's all connected. And so if you go a little forward now, think of OpenAI today and how they're building data partnerships with major media companies, like all these different platforms that are now, there's a partnership. And you can see that in the search results in Search GPT, which I'm sure you've covered quite a bit, which is, if you ask a question, it brings back the actual citations, but that's a data partnership. They're not stealing that data. They're referencing it and taking you right to it, which is quite frankly what Google looked like a long time ago, maybe not so much now. And so all of these pieces, I could even point to Yext, by the way, like we have data partnerships with literally 250 different platforms around the world. So as soon as somebody changes data in Yext, it literally synchronizes through a data partnership with hundreds of other platforms. And so I think fundamentally, every company, I don't really care what you do, you're a data company. And everything you do is some sort of data contract, even to the level of like a plumber coming to your house, the parts they need, the time they spent, the address they went to, the service rendered, the bill, the email, the statement, the payment, all of those things reside on a data layer. And so if you can analyze that and free it up, you can really learn a lot more about business.
that's fascinating and so true. And obviously, you're right about SEOs. I know for myself, I'm swamped in data from many tools, and it's it's most of the job is just working out what's reliable and what's the right stuff to look at. So you're totally right. And in regards to the data smart method that you mentioned in the book, could you give us a quick overview of what this approach is and how it can transform a business's relationship with data?
Sure. I mean, I hate to be Captain Obvious, but it's a pretty obvious method, right? Which is My brother and I, as we were looking at the years of working in data and data strategy, and for him, the legal aspects of data, it's basically a 4-step process. You need to identify the data that matters. That's sort of that lean data idea. You need to value it. Then you need to structure it. This is the part where everybody falls down. This is like, think of all the web pages with no schema markup. I'm going to try and speak a little SEO. I'm not an SEO, but there's this overlap where the data guy and the SEO guy can kind of talk. We're going to use that as a Rosetta Stone. But like, think of schema.org, right? Like schema, how many sites don't do schema properly? It just blows my mind. I'm like, you could spoon feed the machine in a language it understands. And you're like, no, I've got to write this new blog. Like, stop it. You should focus on those things. That's structure. And then the last thing is protecting the data asset, which is all about the legal ramifications. What should you keep? It's about GDPR. It's about really staying on the right side of history and not falling into surveillance. And so each of those is important. I think the one piece that my brother and I spend a lot of time on is what is the proper order? Because a lot of people are like, oh, identify and now protect it. It's like, no, you should probably value it before you protect it. But valuing data is very subjective currently and very hard for a lot of businesses to do. So our recommendation is you value it right after you identify it, because it forces you to really do the mental process of, is my customer data the most important thing? Is my new product data the most important thing? Is my social feed the most important thing? And as you do that and you rank it, it helps you prioritize what to structure first. And so it's that specific order. And we spent a lot of time in the book breaking that down, which is identification. I think everybody agrees. You first got to know what you have, but valuing it before you structure it is what gives you the prioritization. Otherwise, nothing ever gets structured, because people just get into these 2-year cycles of, we're going to fix this. And it's going to be, no one ever finishes those projects. They all fail. It's much better to take it step by step by going, this is the most valuable data. We're going to put the most time and effort into its quality, its accuracy, its recency, its frequency, and structure. And once I have that, I'm happy to move on to the next thing. But I see most data projects fail because they can't get out of their own way as to what's most important.
Yeah, and I think, don't know if it's connected, but when there's companies and you've got all different departments, obviously you may do that to some degree in your own silo, but as an organization, they're barely connecting those dots up. So you're kind of going after your different data points, but you're not joining that together. I guess that's probably quite common.
Oh, it's yeah. So, I mean, we would typically call that the silo effect, right? So each department's like, no, this is mine. I'm like, first off, it's not yours. It's the company's, and that's adorable, but it's not yours. And I appreciate the level of, sort of excitement some departments get. I think that's why people should have a chief data officer. And I've seen like chief data officer, chief data analytics officer. I really think you need someone that is at the executive level, basically saying, I am empowered by the board and by the executive team to go in, not to ruin your day, not to steal your data, but to help identify. Because that's the other problem. I think when you go to department by department, say, you've got to put all your data in here, like just do that. That's not the right path either, because you're just creating more data gluttony in a centralized place. What you really need to think about is help them understand what you need the data for, why, and what is the benefit to that department if they provide it. But it's very rare that you have someone, unless they are a separate entity at the company, focusing on that, because there is a lot of diplomacy in that process, but fundamentally it's very doable, but it's really that you have to dedicate someone to it.
No, great point. And yeah, so the book focuses on unlocking data's value, especially for AI. What's the biggest misconception companies have when it comes to using data for AI? Obviously, I see a lot of chatter on LinkedIn and so on. And in my market, obviously the charity sector, and there's still a lot of kind of concerns about it. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear what you think on this.
The biggest misconception, I would probably say, I'm going to give you two. So the largest misconception I see is companies or businesses are sort of myopically focused on this idea of their AI strategy. And again, you don't have an AI strategy. Okay. You need a data strategy, but you don't have an AI strategy. In other words, everyone that thinks they're building an AI strategy, every 6 hours, a better AI comes out that crushes whatever their strategy was, and they should really just use that, right? So it's very hard. And don't get me wrong, there's some companies, OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, of course they have an AI strategy. But the 99.99% of the rest of the companies out there, you really need a data strategy, not an AI strategy. And the reason why, just as we just discussed, if you can free up and structure your knowledge, then you can take advantage of all these new things. That's the first misconception generally, which is we are perseverating on the wrong thing, which is this could be biased. What about this model? I'm like, that's all going to get better. So don't get too worried about that, because that's going to get better, and there will be regulations and all these things. People will solve that problem. That is not your problem to solve. You need to solve your data problem, which is it's not in a good state to leverage that. And so that's number one. Number two is there's this thing called the explore versus exploit trade-off. And I think this is a fundamental problem, which is when your brain is in the exploration mode, you're trying things. This is actually a classic Google thing. There was a paper back in 2020 called The Messy Middle by Google. You probably read it. Not a lot of people read it, but it's 100 pages. It's got to be the best piece of data science construct out of Google in so many years. And it was incredibly prescient, because what it was saying is it's sort of like, hey, there's no linear journeys, right? Like people are all over the place using search. And what's interesting with AI is in terms of their strategies are people are sitting around going, I'm not sure if we're ready to really do this. And what they're focusing on is the exploit. The exploit is to take an action for one or for the business's benefit. It's not in the bad sense of the word. It's actually in the academic sense of the word. And so everyone's worried about, yeah, I'm not sure if we should use this. I'm not sure. You are missing the golden opportunity of exploration. You should be trying this in everything you do. I'm not saying put it into the actual business. I'm not saying do anything nefarious. I'm saying in any legal and purposeful way that you can explore how these tools can help your business, you should be trying. Your first instinct today should be, can I automate with AI and explore that space? It should not be, I'm worried about this. I mean, if we start using this and they say, no, that's a problem. I'm like, that's not going to happen. What's going to happen is the people that explore realize, okay, if they say we can't do this, that's fine. We figured out 12 other ways we can use this. That's the beauty. And I actually think if you go back to academic research on this, that's what the explore versus exploit trade-off is all about. It's a statistical research understanding from, I think, the 1950s that just says, look, the human brain kind of can only do one of those two things at the same time. It's very hard to explore. Like, I wonder what to do in Croatia when I visit, next week. It's very hard to think that way and then go buy your hotel tickets or your airline tickets. It's a different process for your brain. And I think people need to get into the explore mode. You might have also heard this as like the growth mindset. You have to have that with AI, because you're gonna misunderstand what the opportunity is. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
Yeah. No, it's great. And I think, obviously the thing that seems to be the concern is the security aspect of it. How safe is my data? But obviously, I guess with anything, you just got to be sensible with what data you feed into it and how you feed it in, and that's,
yes.
I don't know what the risk is. I mean, most of the information you put out there is going to be available somehow to get online anyway from other sources. So it's not.
Yeah. And look, I think we should be smart about this, right? Like, don't feed it personal information. Just start there. No customer data. Don't do anything with it. Just start there. Start with your products. Start with constructs or things discussed in the news. Start with your products discussed in the news. There's a million data sets that you could start to accentuate and understand. Hey, nothing really happens, but when we do this type of announcement into this type of audience, that's pretty interesting. How can we automate that? Or how can we do better outreach on that? Even if you wanted to just rewrite emails for yourself in a tone that's maybe a different, sort of approach, there's a million ways to try it. And I guess my point would be is I would avoid anything if the second you think about it, you go, that might not be good, then don't do it. It's not that really hard. Take a step back. And if you have questions, go to your legal team or your compliance team and think about it. There's different regulations, obviously, by jurisdiction. But generally speaking, there is so much data out there about your business, about what you're trying to achieve with your business, about the charities you support. People don't even realize, like, search as we know it's over. And I know I understand your audience, but like I've been saying for I think 4 years, I think we got to stop saying search engine optimization. I think we should be saying search experience optimization. That way we can keep all the t-shirts, right? Like there's no reason to change the whole acronym. But the reality is this experience is changing. So much so where we can see, if you don't follow this, people are, I see SEOs all the time. Google's still 90% and everything else. I'm like, guys, don't bet against Google. I'm not saying that. They have all the search, they have all the compute, they have all the scientists. They're going to be fine. But you can't look at it and not recognize that between TikTok, Instagram, ChatGPT, all of these platforms, search is starting to fragment. And probably more important than that, rankings are fragmenting, which is one of the things that you mentioned, the charity sector, obviously, that you support. One of the things here is, do you realize how few people structure data about every charity they support as a business in a clear and concise way? And do you realize that Google does not use that data in ranking businesses? And they should? The reality is, I was in New York City for a meeting last week, and I broke my reading glasses. I hate to say it, I have reading glasses. So I broke my reading glasses. And when that happened, I asked search, hey, I need reading glasses, Google. And it's like, here's the closest ones. But I'm in New York City. There's 57 places within 3 blocks I could go. And so I said, you know what? Let me go to ChatGPT, or now Search GPT, or whatever they're calling it. I said, hey, I broke my reading glasses, but I really like to work with businesses that support the local community when I travel, because I travel a lot. It came back and ranked them by their community with links, with notes, with citations directly to the pages. I'm sorry. That means whatever I want to rank businesses by, the consumer is now in control. Now I get it. For SEOs, you're probably under your desk in the fetal position based on what I'm saying. Like you're like, if every rank's different, how am I going to do this? I'm like, yeah, you need to start thinking a little differently, which is rankings are fragmenting. So we have search fragmenting and rankings fragmenting. Like I asked it the other day that I've some work I have to do on the side of my house. I'm like, where can I get like a scissor? It's called a scissor lift. It's this little machine that you can, it like raises and lowers short guys like me so I can reach higher on the roof. And so it's basically that it literally comes back to me. ChatGPT comes back to me and goes, well, what's your budget? Do you have a timeline? Are you getting professional help, or is it just you? Like it's literally helping me re-rank things based on what is probably important. That's what we call inverse prompting. I asked it a question, but then it inverts it and asks me 5 good questions that I didn't know to ask, and then it re-ranks everything. So I think everyone needs to take a really big step back and go, this is happening twice as fast as people realize. And we have data to prove that. But beyond that, nobody's really talking about the rank fragmentation. And that's a whole nother level that I think the search experience optimization community, sorry, I'm just going to steal it. I think they need to start really attacking that.
No, you're 100% correct. I mean, it came up in my chat with Natalia Witchick around, the fact that it's pretty much worthless tracking kind of keywords and stuff now, because like you say, every single search is different for everyone. And she did an experiment actually I think they were in Poland, and they had her laptop and her partner's laptop, and they did the same search on the same Chrome browser, and it came up different. It's so and I, in the news I did earlier this week, was obviously Google introducing AI into things like Google Maps and stuff a lot more now. So they would even be able to tell if I did a search and it's raining like it usually is in London, then they'll be able to say that these are indoor things that you might be interested in because it's raining, and it's not going to stop raining until 6 o'clock. So, it's going to get so much more intelligent than back in the day where you just put in a keyword into a page and that's going to help you appear for all these different searches. So, yeah, you're totally right. And obviously, I've had other chats where, yeah, like you say, journeys are completely different now because of the way that smartphones are, tablets, watches, whatever, they're all going to different applications or browsers and stuff. And it's just changing the way the search landscape is. And obviously if these Google court cases come to fruition and they get what they want in terms of the demoting Google from being the main browser on some of these devices, then obviously that's going to change the way things are as well. But yeah, no, it's fascinating to see where it goes. But you're totally right.
And also, look, I won't comment on sort of the regulatory stuff because it's outside my purview. But I would tell you this: I think one of the reasons I've admired the SEO community for a very long time as more of a data strategy, data side is there's definitely correlation around structured data and search results. We can prove that at Yext. We've been doing this for almost 20 years. At the same time, I think people have to realize that this is all going to get much worse before it gets better. So humbly, I would offer to you as a marketer, certainly someone that works in marketing, marketers ruin everything they touch. Everything. Okay. Now stick with me, which is as soon as marketers could use text messaging, what'd they do? They texted the world until it got banned. As soon as they had email, what'd they do? Spam. As soon as they had billboards on the highway going back 100 years, what'd they do? They ruined driving in the countryside, right? Like marketers cannot help themselves. And so the reality is the current marketing focus for a lot of SEO is this is Gen AI. It's all about creating the structure or pushing out content. And I don't think they're wrong. I think that's going to get worse, meaning you and I are going to see by the end of this coming summer, we are going to see 5 billion new blog posts on summer gardening tips for London and for UK. 5 billion. There's nothing stopping that. And then Google's looking at that going, well, why would I even point to your blog? My AI can write gardening tips just as well as your AI can write gardening tips. No one is going to rank around that informational information. What they will rank for is not only do they have the gardening tips, that's fine, but they have the structured data of the right tools, where to buy them, how much they cost, what discounts there are, if that local business that does it supports charities. All of those structured facts will be what the citations point to. And it used to be years ago, a lot of SEOs, some still are very into it. But once Yext got going, citations became less of a big deal to a lot of SEOs. They're like, do I have to get the data right everywhere? I'm like, guys, try any search on a local business in any of the AI systems, ChatGPT, Gemini. The citations are all long tail sites. They're all these little small, like Chamber of Commerce, MapQuest, all these things that SEOs have walked away from. I'm like, you're missing the fundamental point here, which is I get that you want your content to show up where the humans are. I get that because that's the funnel. The problem is there's this wall of machines that control what the humans see. And the machines don't care about where the humans are. In other words, if you go to Instagram or you go to ChatGPT and you ask it a question, it is the gatekeeper as to what data to show the human, just like Google is. And if you don't convince the machine that your data is structured, it's trustworthy, it's consistent, it's updated, it's frequent, if you don't do those classic academic data science approaches, you are not going to win. Because 99.9% of the time, people aren't on a website for a brand or for a business. 99.9% of the time, they're in platforms asking questions, and that's about to skyrocket. So I think things get worse in terms of just content everywhere, AI generated, but I think it immediately gets, or quicker than people think, will get better, which is those who feed structured knowledge in a consistent and frequent way are going to do really well.
Yeah, 100%. I think we've seen in the data leaks, obviously the leaks from Google this year, kind of some of the signals and the data points that Google look into. Obviously, the only thing we didn't know is how they kind of, as you state, rank them in such a way or weight them. We don't really know, but they did leak obviously the kind of data points that they take into account when they feature you or not, and also as you stated around what you need to put, but also your customers' experiences. That's why reviews, case studies and stuff are so vital, because it makes you unique compared to your competitor. They can't have those same reviews, and you have to make sure they're marked up. And I did put it wasn't in the news, but I mentioned it, where basically people are clocking on to the fact that Reddit is so popular now on Google, and obviously they have their partnership and everything, and they're clocking on to, they can influence how certain companies are being shown on the
Yes.
results. They're leaving reviews, and some are not, let's say, honest,
Yes.
and it's kind of influencing what people are being seen on the searches. So
Yeah.
obviously it goes both ways.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because I forget who wrote it. There was a tweet. It might have been the SEO. I believe her name's Lily or Lily Ray. Just
Oh yeah, Lily Ray.
she's
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant. Like half the stuff she writes, she's brilliant. I think she put at one point, like maybe 6 months ago, it's not a tactic, it's a loophole until it's closed. And it was not, I mean, it was brilliant because it's so true. It's one of those things of it's like, oh, Reddit, that thing's a loophole if you're using that to drive the review. Like we know that has to get shut down because that's actually not good for the customer journey. And so I thought it was like one of those things. I'm like, you should print that out and put it on everyone on their wall, because it's the right thing, which is I'm all for looking for tactics that can give you an edge. There's nothing wrong with that. But please remember, there's really nobody at Google or OpenAI or Claude or meaning Anthropic. Nobody there has the title SEO because they don't care. There's a lot of data scientists there, but the whole SEO community is looking through an opaque window at what comes through. And they if they would, in a way, go back to data science school and understand that in 1996, there was a paper written by Wang and Strong that talks about information quality. And it's basically how machines and humans rate information. It's like, this is it. And if you compare that to, I won't speak to the leaked documents or the real, all that stuff, that's fine. But if you compare that to things that SEOs have proven over the years that really work, it's all the same stuff. It's just very basic, which is spoon feed the machines how they want to be fed. Give them context in all cases you can. The more data, the more depth you give them, the better. The more consistent they can verify the data in other places, as big as it can be, is better. The more frequent you update it, the better. The more recent, those are different actually, so recent and frequent. All of those factors. But there's literally a paper from 1996 that's like, hey, here's how this works. And it's been cited like 8,000 times in other academic papers. And so I think there's a lot of great academic research that people go back to and understand. This is not rocket science. It is very much this understanding of there's some really clear tactics that are probably always going to work better. And it's not figuring out that Reddit's a loophole, right? I'm not saying if people want to try that, that's fine. But that's not, I don't think that lasts very long, right? I think at some point someone says, we got a problem here, and they'll tweak it. But I think this is much more moving into the world where it's not, number one, if it's not centralized anymore and it's actually fragmenting, that's an opportunity. And number two, if the fragmentation is also in the rankings in each of those areas, and there's different AI known for different data sets or ways to engage, that's an opportunity too. And I understand that might be more complex, but what it means is that the customer journey becomes far more personal and it's far less dependent on surveillance. And I think that's phenomenal for everybody. Well, regardless of your regulatory authority of choice, surveillance has been a huge mistake over the last 20 years. And I think it's been a net detriment to us, our kids, to the feed, to data gluttony. All of that's been bad. And so this is an opportunity to have a real dialogue that's personal with an AI that gets them to the long tail to actually make an informed decision instead of going to a centralized location that is gamed all the time.
Yeah, and I agree, to be fair. So yeah, we just moving on. So we got next one was, can you share an example of a successful data partnership and what made it so effective? Obviously, you cover a few. Yeah.
Well, so one of the earliest ones, sorry, I feel like I'm going back decades, and I am. So let me give you one of the earliest ones, and I'll give you one more recent. But one of the earliest ones you brought up, which was weather data. Like people don't realize, but psychologically speaking, when it's rainy out, it tends to obviously sort of slow down your system. Your biology behaves differently. Your access to light behaves differently. And as those things happen, you actually don't shop as much. You don't want to buy things as much. Now there's later when it's sunny for 3 hours, people raid shop, right? Like, so there's all these other things that happens. And so one of the earliest data partnerships that was just astounding is the Weather Channel and the National Weather Services They realized that with a real-time API feed of the projected sunlight and rain over time, do you have any idea how many companies buy that and bake it into their ad placement when they run ads? That's a great example of a seemingly non-related data set to whatever you're doing. It doesn't matter what you're selling, what your business is. People tend to be more engaged when they have access to sunlight, or they have access to, let's say, not pouring. And so that's a really big deal. That was one of the smartest ones. That was also financial services, one of the first that caught that. They literally could short retail companies and restaurants based on their percentage of outdoor seating, based on what the last trailing 3 months of weather data was, and it was incredibly accurate at the earnings of the company. So that's one that's fast. If people want to look it up, it's a great story. I think today, if I was going to again go back to good partnerships, I really think that's the edge. You had mentioned that, and I appreciate the mention of the book that my brother and I wrote. But the reality is, part of the reason we wrote it is there was no other book on how to do data partnerships. Like, no one had ever stopped to go, hey, how would you do this? So I don't want to say it's a great book. I would say it ranks really high because it's the only book on how to do data partnerships, because no one had ever done it before. And so I look at that, and it's one of these revealing moments where you start to realize, gosh, the future is really just the data and the AI. So if you don't have the data, you better get good at doing data partnerships, because you're gonna have to supplement, and you're gonna have to get creative. But every piece of data, or let's say valuable or lean data, that you apply to it, that's an opportunity to increase value. And I keep using the term lean data. I should give that credit to that too. That's Sean McMahon is a professor at Elon University, a very good old friend of mine. He wrote the paper on lean data years ago. And it's just this idea that not all data is equal. It really has different capabilities and different outcomes based on what it is.
Yeah, no, great point. And so what do you think is the biggest challenges that companies face in starting data partnerships, and how can they overcome them? I mean, I've seen in my own experiences, I've seen the intention to start data partnerships, and then it kind of just fails because of so many things, obviously technically and kind of just communication based as well. But yeah, it'd be great to hear.
First off, I think probably the most obvious thing is it's very hard to tie value for CEOs and executive teams to what's the value of a partnership. And it tends to have a network effect, which is the more partnerships you bring, it actually starts to geometrically scale instead of linearly. So you add the first 5, nothing seems to be happening. And then you add the next 5 and you start to see this. And then you add 50 and it goes like this in terms of what the value proposition is. And so I think for most people, number one, they need to have a head of data partnerships. That it's probably with the chief data officer, or that person maybe could do both. But once again, it's this idea of, if you don't make it someone's job, it is not going to pan out. Secondly, you have to look at it from an investment perspective. I have a gentleman who I've worked with for years in data strategy and data partnerships. He's one of the best in the world, but he's learned over the years, people don't invest in this. And so there's a couple of things that I think are going to change that really quickly, which is, number one, if you're technical and you haven't given API documentation for 2 different APIs to Claude and then asked it to write the data connector, you're missing out. You should go try it, because one of the problems with data partnerships is it's kind of a pain sometimes to like understand what data they have. How does it map? How do you crosswalk from your data set to theirs? Are you using time, geography? There's certain natural linkages. How are you going to do it? And so you can actually now, using AI, write the data connectors without having a team go away for 6 months and try and figure that out. So the effort to make a partnership technically is drastically falling. And so that makes this a little easier, which is, it doesn't have to be as big an investment, or if you are investing, you can do more of it. And so I think a lot of things are moving in that direction that are going to be helpful. But I do think probably the biggest problem for most companies isn't that they don't see the value. I think they understand it's there. It's that they're not ready to either put one person in charge and then give them the investment to get it done. You really need top-down buy-in to where people understand that this is going to take time, but the ramifications tend to be more network or geometric once you do it right.
Yeah, I think you're right in terms of the time-consuming part. I think that's the concern people had in the past, and now obviously thanks to AI, we have got easier solutions for that. And then also, I think what SEOs complain about all the time is that I think a lot of companies have like a short-term kind of mindset, so they haven't got that long-term vision to see how beneficial it could be, as you say. And I think obviously data probably comes into that as well. They want the data when they need it, when they think they need it, and use it then. And obviously, like SEO, they kind of go to it when they see that things are, a lot of them go to SEO when they see their organic traffic's dropping and it's been like severely, it's gone downhill. So yeah, I think probably in the same boat.
To some extent, this is it's a classic meme in the SEO community, right? The "it depends" meme, and that's a problem, right? Because SEO is not the same as a typical science. It's certainly not a physical or mathematical science. It's an observational science. So you make this change and you're observing reactions, but that's a much harder road to getting to actual impact. And so most SEOs, when you say something like, "Hey, as a business, like, well, how long is this going to take?" And they go, "Well, it depends." And that's to be fair to them, there's no other answer. That is the right answer. But patience to the business that's trying to make payroll is not, you can't blame them on the other side as well. And so I think in all of these scenarios, and by the way, I want to be very clear to everyone, it's definitely going to get harder. If you don't get anything back from AI companies, remember, the only reason why Google shares data on keywords, and that's dropped since 2014, the amount of data they provide you back about long tail searches. And that's the only reason why they share that data is because that data is critical to the ad spend question, right? But if I'm paying $20 a month to an AI to keep my data private, you're not going to get anything. You're not going to get keywords. You're not going to get my conversation. You're not going to get anything. And so you really have to look back and go, well, then what's the strategy here? Because if AI, and I do believe a lot of the regulators are going to step in and say, you may not share. If you're paying for a premium AI, that company may not share any data directly with these. You want search, go to a search engine. But this is a different thing because people openly share much more conversationally than the weird thing our brain does to convert what we want into keyword speak. It's a very different world. It's a completely different machination, much more cognitive burden over here than on dialogue. And so as that changes, I think a lot of AI and their SEO companies have to really start to think about, we can power the structured data in these AI systems, but we may not get the same data back. We've got to get much better at listening, not tracking. And so when someone lands on your site from ChatGPT, I've seen all these new posts from SEOs going, wow, I don't have a ton of traffic from ChatGPT, but it's converting at a much better rate to my client. Why? Because your client is getting answers. And so it's a qualified lead based on the data you fed to the AI. That might be the path forward. In other words, I wrote almost a year ago in Adweek, an article, because people are like, well, what's going to happen to ads? I think ads are going to become offers. I think the reality is AI, once it knows 3 questions. Hey, I want to go to dinner tonight. Well, what are you in the mood for, Christian? My wife and I are thinking sushi. Are you bringing the kids? No, it's just us. That's only 3 questions. That could take that, hit every sushi place in town, hit their knowledge graph and go, do you have any offers for a couple that wants to come out tonight? And they're like, yeah, here's an offer. That's very different than an ad. An ad is I type in sushi and you don't know if I'm trying to figure out how to make sushi, if I want to know if it's healthy or safe, or if I want to go get sushi. So the context in a dialogue is infinitely better to conversion than what we've been living in. And I think that's probably the path forward.
Wow. Yeah. I never even thought of some of those angles, and you're completely right, actually. So that's really fascinating. And obviously, if next year, and it looks very likely that at least OpenAI will launch AI agents where they can go out and do the actual thing for you. So if you feed them, as you say, the structured data correctly, they're going to go in, and obviously your website has to work correctly as well and all that kind of thing. But, you're going to have to, it's going to go in, find that place, book the table. It's going to be fascinating.
There's in that book, The Messy Middle. In that paper. I'm going to go back. Everyone, if you haven't read that, please go back and download it. It's so worth it.
I'll try and put a link. Yeah, I'll try and put a link in the description.
So just one thing is they draw a chart where this is high complexity, so complex. This is low complexity. And I don't know if you remember this. This is likable. This is not likable or less likable. And what they said is, look at this. And then let's say you're doing car insurance. Sorry to all the car insurance people out there. It's less likable of an process, but it's actually quite complex. Then there's cereal. Cereal is not complex, and it's maybe borderline likable. I don't really think about it that much. It's not complex. Then you get into sort of like divorce attorney. Super complex, really dislikable, right? Over here, trip for a holiday. Holiday, very likable, very complex. Okay, here's what's about to happen. This whole area, whether it's likable or not, AI can already do better than search. Nothing to talk about. It can help you understand complex things way better than opening 27 tabs with your different search queries than trying to assimilate it yourself. This is already happening. This process, let's say this is buying, I mean, it could be anything that's like garbage bags. This could be buying, it doesn't matter what it is. Things that are not complex, that's next year, that's AI agents, where I don't have to worry about it because it's not complex. I don't care if the AI buys the grocery list based on a photo of the fridge. It doesn't matter. It's not that complex. But this is already here, and it's happening twice as fast based on our data as people think. This is coming. But if you're in our business, helping businesses be found, be discoverable, be engaged, you have to start thinking this way. Now, this is not what was written in the paper. This is my readjustment of a 2020 paper based upon what we now know. And that's why I think it's a great framework to think about.
Yeah, no, it is for sure. And so I guess we'll just fit the last few points. I guess for companies with limited data resources, how can they start leveraging data partnerships effectively? Are there any ways to make it, work on a smaller scale?
This is one of those weird times where I'll meet with the largest companies in the world, and they're sort of like, yeah, we have a moratorium. No one's allowed to use AI. And we're not feeding any data because and they should be. They're nervous. There are elements here that, whether regulatory wise or risks that we talked about. Meanwhile, the mid-size and small-size businesses, they are having a field day. For example, I'll give you an example of one of my best friends in the world. He runs a licensing platform agency for if there's like a kids movie like Sonic the Hedgehog or something like that. He's the guy that does the deals for backpacks and bubble blowers and all this stuff. Like he's in licensing. And he goes and he has this meeting with this 70-something-year-old guy who is the bubble guy in the United States. There's one guy, people don't realize this, that all the toys that shoot bubbles, have bubbles, are bubbles, comes from basically this one guy. He has like a monopoly on bubbles. And he's 70-something years old. And my buddy JJ says to him, like, what's new in your business? This is almost a year ago. And he goes, oh man, AI. And you're like, what? How do you know? What do you mean you do bubbles? What do you mean AI? This man, the entrepreneurial mind, he built this whole thing from scratch. It's still a very small business, but lots in revenue. He realized that he can sit with a client, do a 3D artistic rendering, just speaking to an AI of what the new toy is going to look like that has bubbles. They can then ship that to a 3D printer, which sends the actual cast to the company within 24 hours, and it can write the legal contract associated with that. I'm sorry. He is not a global business. He is an entrepreneur, and he's already wired this thing. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but it cuts down on probably 70%. And he does say, I think he said something to the effect of, it cut down on a 14-week cycle to 4 days. Now, to your question, I think the whole point of this is the data's there. You just need to see it and identify. It's not like you don't have your receipts from last week of what you've sold. It's not like you don't know what your newest services are. The data is there. One of the best ways to think about it is this. Record yourself, if people allow you, having a conversation or someone walking in your store. Just record in your mind. What are the 50 things you are most asked? 50 things. It's not that hard. Like, do you have this in stock? How fresh is this? Do you provide these services? Just write them down. That is the beginning of your data. And quite frankly, getting that data right and all the structure around it is what will drive 80% of the value. The last 20% you can build over time, but you will get 80% of your business from answering 20% of the data correctly and accurately. But it's not hard to get started. It does not take a lot. In fact, if you look at Yext, if you were to look at all the data that we focus on, it's not a ton of data. It's getting bigger all the time, but it's not a ton of data. It's not like every retail purchase that ever happened in your 20 stores. It's actually really simple data, but it drives the massive portion of how AI and search gets to your doorstep.
Yeah, I can imagine so many people waste time on focusing on data points that are leading you to just pointless projects or endless projects that just, like you said earlier, that won't get completed, and it's just wasted your time, where you could have spent that time actually fully focusing on the data that means something. And yeah,
Absolutely.
For sure. So what advice would you give to companies wanting to prepare their data for AI integration?
Probably a lot of what we discussed. I think there's a very far difference from having data and having it structured in a way that really helps. And I think probably the best, and we probably covered it in some of these other messages, is number one, you should have a plan of what your data strategy is. Don't worry so much about the AI. That's going to move so fast, it'll keep getting better. But directionally, you should align that you need to have a database or knowledge graph or whatever tool you want to use. Obviously, that's a Yext thing, but generally speaking, it could be whatever tool you want. You need to start structuring the data and understanding what are your fill rates like. And what that mean by that is, if you have product information, do you have all the product information for every product? What is your fill count? You need to think about products, services, anything that is like a core thing. For example, like events. People often overlook events. And it's like, why would you overlook something you're going to put a ton of time and effort into and not make sure every machine on the planet is thoroughly educated on what your events are? They just stop. And it's sort of like, no, structure it and then feed it to the machines. And the more you do of that, the better off you're going to be. I guess what I'd say is, I think the future for many of us is the more structured knowledge that we can provide these platforms, the more time it will free us up as humans to make the human connections with the customers, with the community, with the environment, all of those things. Because think of most companies. I know you're obviously between the podcasts and the search chat, the chats that you're doing with Sean, all of these things have data associated with them. But the more you can automate this and have it structured, the more you can have these conversations, which is really probably the best part of our day. So the whole point is, how do you automate more of that so you can do more of this?
Yeah, no, 100%. And AI does help me keep things in order and speed things up for sure. And yeah, where do you see data strategy evolving in the next, I put 5 to 10 years, but I mean, things are moving so quickly. You're talking 1 to 2 years, really, especially with the rise of generative AI. So yeah, I guess 1 to 2 years rather than 5 to 10.
Yeah. I think if everyone's familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, I think we've been in the trial of disillusionment for a while, which is good, where there's a lot of angst. I get very nervous on some of the things I see from some of the top SEO people. I just don't think it's the right time to short this stuff and be like, oh, it'll never like all these posts on it doesn't reason. And I'm like, well, I could argue that having been at conferences with most of you for the last 10 years of my life, none of you reason at 2 a.m. after a few drinks either. Like, humans don't reason great, and neither do machines, but there is a close similarity. So everyone relax and go, it'll never do this. I think everyone going, it'll never be able to, please don't use superlatives. Say it can't yet. Add yet to everything. Have a growth mindset. Add yet, because that is really what's going to happen. So if you're getting prepared and you're attacking this, look at it as just it's opportunity. I started my first company in 1999, and it was the dawn of the internet. Since then, there's been things like social launch, mobile launch, all these things. Nothing comes close to what I experienced starting my first company at the internet, the dawn of the internet, and now. This is the closest thing I can tell anyone who's younger, who hasn't experienced it. This is the best primordial soup to create than I've ever seen. And so embrace that in your practice and try and figure out ways you can leverage it. And to the businesses, make sure you understand, yes, this is scary, but the beauty of technology is that it gives us as humans back the one asset that is more important than all assets: time. We can all make money, but you can never have more time. And technology has shown, although it can be painful, it always gives us more time. And that's what this offers. And the more you think of it that way, the more I think you're aligned to how to leverage it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, you have to embrace it. It's going to happen. It's happening. It's not if it's going to happen, it's happening. And, OpenAI and Meta and Microsoft, they've all in the last few weeks have said they're going to keep on heavily investing in it. And most of them made profits from it. So far, OpenAI is struggling a little bit in that area, but they're going to continue. But Microsoft and Meta are doing well for it. It might be the other way around, but Meta are definitely doing well from it. I know financially, because Mark Zuckerberg said. But generally, they're all going to heavily invest in it. So it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's either you embrace it and take it on and learn to work alongside it and live alongside it, or you're going to fall behind. And that's facts.
Yeah. And it's that exploration versus exploitation. Don't worry so much on, is this the right way to put it to work? Just explore with it. Just start there. And that will open up a lot of opportunities. Ethan Mollick, who is, I think, the Wharton Professor of Entrepreneurship here in the United States, he's probably one of the best to follow in terms of, he's academic, but he wrote a New York Times bestseller, Co-Intelligence. People go read that. Start to understand that, generally speaking, he's very optimistic. And his whole point is, look, we don't know where it's going. The only thing I can promise everyone today is I have no idea where it's going. What I can also promise you is I still know what to do, which is I need to prepare my data for wherever it's going, because that is what it's going to run on. And the more you can do that, the more you can be prepared. So that would be my parting advice.
That's great. And the last kind of question is for anyone interested in starting a career in data strategy. What skills or experiences do you think are essential? I think obviously a lot of people are going to be going towards this area. And how do you what do you suggest in terms of getting involved and that kind of thing?
As people are getting into this, whether they're young or they're making a career change, generally speaking, I think try to read and understand as much as you can about how these systems work. Try to understand the statistics behind them. It will take you a little bit of time, but to actually quote Ethan Mollick, who I just referenced, he says 10 solid hours using AI, not reading about it, but using it, is probably all you need to unlock a lot of what it's capable of. And so even the things I'm saying now, don't ask me, Sean, what they should do. Go ask AI what you should do, and you should read and prepare and ask AI, hey, here's a web page. What structured data is on it? Okay. It's going to answer you. Then go, what structured data should be on it? And it's going to answer you. That is a great way to start using AI to also understand how to leverage it. So there's a lot of steps here, but I think people completely underestimate what it already can do because they're not exploring enough space with it.
Yeah, I think that it's the same with a lot of things in life. If especially in marketing, if you don't spend time digging into it and actually doing the thing, you're not going to learn actually how it works, how it operates. So yeah, that's how I was quite an early adopter of the LLMs, and I just found them fascinating. And people were saying, with the video quality, look, this is wrong, there's an extra finger, and it's like, well, compared to what it was doing 6 months ago, it's pretty fascinating.
Yes.
Now you go 6 months later and how good it is now.
Yes.
So you've got to keep on testing it, learning, and obviously now it's got a memory. It's going to be even more interesting.
What's so amazing, and I understand part of your audience, what I would say generally is the community of search engine optimizations, SEO, people in digital marketing, it is a largely self-taught highly curious community. So I think they're going to be fine. I think the reality is like, that's all you need with this right now. And what's crazy is all the effort to be a good professional in that space, it doesn't come from college. It comes from effort and it comes from studying. But for the first time ever, the studying platform is going to be able to teach you exactly what you need to know. Like, that's crazy. Because if I only have a downside of SEO, there's a lot of high priests and priestesses. There's a lot of people that sort of set the sail and everyone's like, oh, well, they said it's got to be right. That's not true. And so what I love about using AI for all of these things is it unlocks your ability to not only be curious, but to explore in a way that you may not be able to unless you pay someone $50 for their class. And I don't think I think this unlocks education and opportunity. But I think for a community that I look at very fondly as they are some of the most curious, growth mindset, intrinsically driven people I've ever met. And I think they have a real opportunity here.
Yeah, and that's a great endpoint. I think that's a brilliant statement. And I guess just to finish off, have you got anything personal planned in terms of work coming up that you want to talk about? Is there anything that you got coming up?
No, my focus is absolutely the same as it has been for a long time with Yext. Is how do we help people get that data ready for what's coming? How can they leverage our tools and our platforms? But I'm often speaking around the world at conferences on how this affects very much to our conversation. This has been excellent, by the way. It's much more just, how can I help people understand where this goes? And I'm always, adding and writing and putting stuff on LinkedIn where I'm like, I think this is a little different than what we're worried about than what's actual, which tends to be my focus. But overall, I think my goal for the next, let's say 6 months to a year is to continue to help people understand the value of structure and what it's going to do and what opportunities it's going to open up. Basically trying to push people to stop worrying and start trying. And I think that's probably the most important message people can take right now.
Yeah, 100%. And all the links so people can follow you will be in the description, and also a link to your book. So if people want to check that out, then definitely go and explore, as we say. And thank you so much for joining me today, Christian. It's been a real pleasure, and I've learned loads. I mean, I've already in my head got some things I want to go and explore. So yeah, I really appreciate it.
Excellent, Sean. Well, it's been a pleasure, and I hope to do it again, and really appreciate it.
Thank you. Cheers.